Jamunatera Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janabalabha Girdhari Gopi Janabalabha Girdhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatera Vanachari Jamunatera Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Nitai Gaur Hare Ba, Hare Ba, Hare Ba, Bala Hare Ba. Jai Om Vishnu Parad Paramahamsa. Parivrajacharya Asto Saraswati Siman Srila Abhaj Swami Bhaktisiddhanta Swami Prabhupada Maharaja Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Parad Paramahamsa. Parivrajacharya Asto Saraswati Siman His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Prabhupada Maharaja Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavena Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Si Kahao Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Si Advaita Gadadhar Si Vatsari Si Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Sisi Radha Krishna Gopal Gopinath Syamakunda Radha Kunda Girigapadam Ki Jai. Savindavan Dham Ki Jai. Si Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Si Jagannathpuri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Munamaya Ki Jai. Srimati Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakti Vena Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Our glory is to the sum of devotees. Our glory is to the sum of devotees. Our glory is to the sum of devotees. Our glory is all glories to Sisi Gaura and Gauranga. So welcome to this morning class, morning discussion, morning sharing and caring in Krishna consciousness. And today is Bhaktisiddhanta's day. Is that correct? So, today is Bhaktisiddhanta's day. Who here doesn't know about Bhaktisiddhanta? I don't know about Bhaktisiddhanta. Raise up your hand. Okay, so all of you know about Bhaktisiddhanta. And just to give a little bit of background, Bhaktisiddhanta, as we all know, is one of the sons, one of the kids of the famous acclaimed acharya and scholar, Bhakti Vasudeva Swami. I think he's the fourth son of fourth, yeah. Who said? Huh? Okay. Seventh? You're not sure, okay. But he's he's Bhaktisiddhanta's son, very, very famous acharya in our line of disciplic succession. And I brought my computer because I wanted to discuss some things about his teachings, the 64 principles that he used in managing and leading change in his Gaudiya maths. He has 64 principles. But before we get to that, just some rudimentary about his background. He was born in Puri in 1874, February 6. Who doesn't know? Who has not heard about Puri, Jagannath Puri? I've not heard about Jagannath Puri. Okay, have not been to Jagannath Puri, raise up your hand. We've never been there. Try to be there. Matajis have all been to Jagannath Puri? Have not been to Jagannath Puri? Let's see your hand. Don't feel shy. So you are in India, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had some specific places that he resided or preached. And now one of those places is Jagannath Puri. He lived in Jagannath Puri for how long? How many years? 18 years. Are you sure? I'm sorry, but if you say something, something can be based on belief. I believe he lived in Puri for this number of years. But belief has to be backed up with substantiation. Means evidence from the Shastra. So if you don't know precisely what is required or what is requested, then better not to, otherwise it becomes something against proper system of speculation. So his birth was very much a cause of joy, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he became involved in Krishna consciousness, that was the time that the teachings of Lord Chaitanya were being flooded with all types of adulterations. And even the practitioners could be a sense or a source of disemphasizement for anybody who aspires to be a spiritualist, or aspires to be a devotee, or aspires to be a follower of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because all in the name of Vaishnavism, people were doing all types of, good stuff. So Bhaktivinoda, at that time, he was preaching vigorously, writing books. In fact, we just went to his house right here yesterday. And in that house, one of the rooms upstairs, that is where Bhaktisiddhanta used to stay each time he visits his father. So, when Bhaktivinoda was involved in his missionary activities, the environment was not conducive for people who are scholarly minded to become involved in Krishna consciousness, because we may say something and the behavior of the leaders is different. That creates some type of disenchantment for anyone who is coming. I mean, it's like in America there is a slogan, walk your talk. Okay, so when the religious preachers or supposed practitioners, there's a difference between a religious or a preacher and a practitioner. A practitioner means he says one thing and he follows that up with his demonstrated by his behavioral patterns. So sometimes, in most cases at that time, Bhaktivinoda observed that people were completely polluted and they were using Krishna consciousness or the mission of Lord Chaitanya as a smoke screen for perpetuating all types of heinous, sinful activities. So, he was praying to have a child to be able to help in the revolution of repositioning Krishna consciousness or the teachings of Lord Chaitanya in the right perspective. And eventually Krishna had his prayers. Bhaktisiddhanta was born. And he really had that wonderful opportunity of becoming exposed to Krishna consciousness at an early stage of his life, early age of his life. He was born in Puri, and it's mentioned in his biography how when during the Jagannath Ratha Yatra, the cart came to the front of Bhaktivinoda's house and got stuck. Couldn't move. And Bhaktivinoda took advantage of the festival, and then he told his wife to bring the child to get some blessings from Lord Jagannath. And when the child was brought before Lord Jagannath, a garland, directly, fell from Lord Jagannath and hung on Bhaktisiddhanta's neck. So that was not by accident, or it was not by great fortune. It was a demonstration or an evidence that, this is the child that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was praying for. He has come to create a revolution in the minds of people or in the minds of a misdirected civilization. So the family was very much in tune with the idea that Bhaktivinoda's prayers were heard, and here the child has come. So Bhaktisiddhanta, he was named Bimal Prasad. People born and names are given. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur gave him the name Bimal Prasad. And at the age of 7, he had memorized all the verses of the Bhagavad Gita. How old are you? Huh? 11. Okay. So he was smaller than this boy. I'm not saying that they should go and memorize all the verses of the Bhagavad Gita, okay? I'm just trying to envisage how small, how young he could be. But so, at that tender age, when kids, boys of 7 years, they just like to play around, Even to go to school, parents will have to force them. Mothers, is it not true? Yeah. They like to play around. But Bhaktisiddhanta was very much involved in studying the scriptures from that early stage or early age of his life. And as Krishna will have it, he had the opportunity of working closely with his father. And I remember there is a scenario which was quite amusing, because when he was schooling, he had formed like a group. He had formed like a group of brahmacharis. But eventually all of them fell off. He was the only one who sustained it. So again, we see that people may know the value of regulation in life, but not everyone is going to be able to sustain the practice of regulation. So Bhaktisiddhanta experimented that concept with his friends and contemporaries by forming a group. Now there are so many groups these days because of the social media, the WhatsApp groups and all these LinkedIn groups and so many groups. So those days there were no social media facility like WhatsApp or LinkedIn or whatever. But everything was like, face-to-face interrelationship. And as he was growing up, he had all of these ideas of how to make the world a better place to live in. And when he developed some attachment or some sense of spiritual belonging for Gurakishore Das Babaji. No, before we get to that, at a very tender age, somehow or the other, Bhaktivinoda had brought some very enticing mangoes to the house. Huh? How many? Yeah, okay. At that time he was 3. he was just 3 years old. And somehow or the other, he ate one of those mangoes. Or he tasted one of those mangoes. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur came, and then he told him, just not really like the way we chastise people. He told him very politely that, things, fruits, whatever that is brought to the house has to be offered to the deities before it is shared amongst members of the family. But with that simple instruction, it's like a way of correcting him for what he has done. But he took it to heart. 3 years old. He vowed never to eat mango for the whole of his life. 3 years old. And when he grew up a little bit and was involved in schooling, he never would read. When he was in college, he will never read. But he always had the highest grade in the whole class. So one could say, well, Bhaktisiddhanta never read. My parents want me to go to school. Yes, I need to go to school for my future. So, I just act like Bhaktisiddhanta. I don't need to read. That is called imitation. We are not Bhaktisiddhanta. So we have to follow things according to our abilities and capabilities. So, because the spiritual information that we want to share is a little bit long, so I wouldn't want to go into too much of other leelas. But there's one thing I wanted to remind ourselves about in terms of when people get into trouble in our movement. When people get into trouble in our movement, what is our response? Proactive or reactive? Now, during Bhaktisiddhanta's time, in one of his marks, one of his disciples strayed from the path of devotional service. In other words, he fell down. And then one of the brahmacharis. And so when he came to that temple, he asked the temple president, where is such and such? He said, oh, he ran into trouble, and he left. Bhaktisiddhanta told him, because he did not treat him kindly, he did not help him, so he left. You go and look for him and bring him back. Imagine someone blooped in a temple. Someone breaks the principle, and then you chastise him so much, and then he blooped. He left. And your guru comes and says, hey, Govinda, go and bring that devotee back. We are talking of compassion. It is exemplified in our acharyas. So, his 64 mats were governed, or they were managed and led with the help of 64 principles. He calls it the 64 principles of community building. Have you heard of Bhaktisiddhanta's 64 principles of community building? I've heard of his 64 principles of community building. Raise up your hand. You heard? Okay. So, those principles are very ideal for our movement. In fact, that's the reason why I wanted to share some of those principles, but it's so long, 64, so it's not going to be possible to hear all of that. But we could just try to get as much as possible so that we can use that, or we can use that knowledge in trying to help ourselves. And especially for the leaders, those, and one may say, well, I'm not the leader, so this doesn't concern me. A leader doesn't necessarily mean that you are stamped as GBC or Sabha member or temple president, general manager, temple commander. No. According to the Bhagavatam, parents are leaders, teachers are leaders. And all of us, we are supposedly teachers. We preach, so we are teaching. So we are leaders. And it is important for us to imbibe the culture of Bhaktisiddhanta based on his 64 principles of community building, because we live in communities. Community is derived from two words, commune and unity. Commune implies that we communicate our feelings, but bearing in mind how the results will be. In other words, the same word you may use, and vocalizing those words matters a lot. You may say, come here. Or you may say, come here. There are two things. The same word, but the vocalization gives different interpretations. And therefore, community basically means that we communicate our feelings in loving ways for the elevation or for the leverage of all concerned. And unity, basically we all know unity. We all looking, the whole world is looking for unity. That's why the United Nations was established, and but still there are wars. So we are looking for unity. We want unity in our families. The family is also it's a micro community. So you have a family, you have a wife, you have a husband with children. That is a micro community. So these principles are not necessarily meant for those who are having positions in ISKCON. And one may be having a position and not necessarily a leader. There are two things. There are multiple things. There is management and there is leadership, and they are completely different phenomena. So the first principle that Bhaktisiddhanta propounded is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instruction in Sistastakam, Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtana, is the only motto of the Gaudiya Math. So, in most of the temples, we recite these Sistastakam prayers every day. But Bhaktisiddhanta built his maths based on preaching, expanding the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And therefore, for those of us who are lucky enough to be part of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, we should think how Prabhupada has sacrificed his life at a very vulnerable stage of his life. He traveled, he sailed across the ocean to America. Not by flight, steamship. And had a number of attacks aboard the Jaladuta. So he made so much of sacrifice. Without love, someone will not be able to make a sacrifice for anyone. So we don't need to make some experiment to figure out whether Prabhupada loves us or not. He loves us. That is why he sacrificed his life for us. What are we doing to be able to help in sustaining and expanding qualitatively and quantitatively his mission? Principle number 2. The Supreme Personality of God as Sri Krishna is the only enjoyer. Everyone and everything else is the object of his enjoyment. It's a common verse in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Bhuktaram, Jagya, Tapasa, Sarva Lok Maheshwara, Suridam, Sarva Bhutana. So, we hear that we are not the enjoyers, but in most cases, we are acting as the enjoyers. We may even preach that we are not the enjoyers, but in most cases, we act as the enjoyers. Isn't that a little bit ironical? No, it is not ironical. It's just the nature of conditioned souls. we don't walk our talks. We are conditioned in a way that we don't usually walk our talk. Someone walks their talk, that is amazing. And so, if we recognize in principle that Krishna is the only enjoyer, and we don't have to claim the results of the proceeds of our services, that we understand that everything else, even the strength with which we are able to execute the service and attain success or meet our goals, Krishna provides that strength. So we can't lay claim to anything. This is a major problem causing troubles in the whole global society. People are looking for peace. That peace has to start with the individual. And how do we get peace? When we give up this attempt for trying to enjoy the resources of material nature, thinking the resources of nature, human and natural resources, are there for us. I mean, sometimes people question, but if we don't eat the animals, whom are they there for? Yes, so people are looking for ways to end troubles or problems in the world, but Bhagavad Gita has provided the very foundation of how to deal with the incessant crisis that we face in the material world, whether it is in the families. Look at it very objectively. You find that even in the families, the family is a microcosm of the society, of the nation. Or the family is a microcosm of the community, of our bigger community. So the problems we find in our own movement are just reflections of what is transpiring in our individual families. If we are not having that loving disposition and care in our families, we don't expect very cordial, loving relationship to transpire amongst the devotees. And therefore, the culture of love, the culture of care, should be first established in the families. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. If we don't love, we can't love the closest person to us, our spouses, our children, if we can't care for them, if we simply want to enjoy them, we want to take the position of Krishna. And we expect him to have peace of mind. Right? It doesn't work like that. So Bhaktisiddhanta emphasized in this very principle that verse of the Bhagavad Gita. Who knows that text? Bhagavad Gita what? Bhaktiram Yagisapasa. Huh? 5? Okay. All right. So, this is a very good verse to be able to provide solutions to global crisis. If people, even in general, if people can understand and live their lives in such a way that they don't try to take up the position of the enjoyer. But so someone could also think, or someone could also say, but if I don't enjoy what I have, so then what's the purpose of my life? What am I to do with my life? It doesn't mean that the purpose of life is to enjoy the resources at your disposal. It's to use those resources in serving the enjoyer
of those resources, and then we will also participate in the enjoyment. I mean, it's like we have food. The man could say, well, I do a major job here, and so I'll stop doing the job. Or the hand could say, well, I'm doing a major job, I have to work so hard and take the food to the mouth, so let me stop doing my job. But if there's some cooperation, if the hand also does his part or its part, then the body is nourished and the hand is also nourished. It's just a simple analogy of how when we serve Krishna and allow him to enjoy the proceeds of our services, we also become beneficiaries. 3, anyone who does not serve Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is ignorant and a killer of himself, Atmajanaha. So the whole population, majority, maybe over 90%, I don't have the statistics, but how many people are serving Hari on this planet? A planet of 8 billion people. Very few people. I have the opportunity to serve Lord Krishna. And so, majority of the people on the planet, they fall into this category of ignorance. And so, if a bunch of people are making policies, generating policies, a bunch of ignorant people are making policies to govern human society, how does that work? There will always be discrepancies. And so we have a big obligation, a big duty to help to spread the mission of Srila Prabhupada, the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, to the general mass of people, so that when they read these books, they can be fortunate to have an adjustment in their behaviors, in their mindset. And some may even take seriously to Krishna consciousness. And that is why the emphasis in our movement, the books are the basis. A number of us came to this movement because we read books written by Srila Prabhupada. And so it's a source, it's a huge source of motivation for seeking deeper in our spiritual quest. So we should also help others to come to this level of serving Hari. Principle 4. To learn to tolerate is one of the most important responsibilities of those living in the mart, those living in our communities. But Krishna mentioned Tam Tiksha Swa Bharata. Tolerance. Although tolerance does not necessarily mean love. There are two concepts, or there's a complete two phenomena. You may not love somebody and tolerate the person for the purpose of mutual coexistence. But that is a good step towards establishing a loving relationship. Because if we can't even tolerate someone, and before we even tolerate someone, we should tolerate ourselves. Sometimes it's so difficult to tolerate ourselves. The mind, or the senses, they push us like this. And in most cases, and this is what is going on, especially outside there, where people are not aware of this very spiritual phenomenon of tolerating ourselves. If we want to tolerate others without tolerating ourselves, it won't work. So, how do we tolerate ourselves? When the senses push us, dictate to us what we should do, we should abuse the senses. The senses and the mind, they are the only entities that we have permission to abuse. We abuse the senses and the mind by ignoring their dictations. You see, when someone says something, okay, for instance, someone pays obeisances to you, and you behave, and you completely ignore the person. Yeah, you may say, oh, he didn't pay obeisances to me, he paid obeisances to the super soul residing within me. Good argument. But you have ignored the person, you didn't acknowledge that greeting. That is an abuse. See, abuse is a little bit strange to most people in developing countries. But in America, there's so many categories of abuse. And even your own child, you could get into trouble. You could go to jail for abuse. Maybe for very little thing. I remember the case of one devoted child. So, something happened, and then maybe the mother chastised him, and then he came back, little boy, like this one. He came back to the mom, he rested on the mom's laps, and he said very lovingly, Mom, such and such happened. And so, that's why you yelled at me? That's why you yelled at me? Now, that is very incriminating. If the mother says, yes, I yelled at you, it's an abuse. So the mother was very smart. She said, no, I didn't yell at you. She gave some loving explanation about what transpired and then how she responded and all this stuff. So, we have a right to abuse the mind and the senses, to ignore what they tell us. Principle 5. Rupanuga devotees offer all glory to the original source instead of depending on their own strength. I've read somewhere when Prabhupada mentions how we should even respond to situations such as since you want to do something, and then you say, yes, I will come to see you tomorrow if Krishna permits. Papa mentioned that we should always add that clause, if Krishna permits. Because, we don't have the strength individually or independently from Krishna to do anything. And therefore, the statement here that Rupanuga devotees, followers of Rupa, we are supposed to be Rupanugas, followers of Rupa Goswami's standards, Rupa Goswami's teachings. There's so many teachings. Sometimes, people get really perplexed and mesmerized by Rupa Goswami's instructions and teachings. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Maharaja is mentioning here that we, as individuals, we have to offer our glory to the original source, to Krishna. And that is also one of the reasons why we glorify our acharyas. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. And we also glorify the devotees. All glory to the simple devotees. What does that mean to us? We do it every day. So that is really like framing our mind, preparing us to understand that we have to ultimately be constantly glorifying the source of everything, the origin of everything, as Krishna. Principle 6. What's the time there? Huh? Or just on principle 6. Maybe we could do some symposium or some seminar on these very community building principles in the future. Principle 6. Those who perform assorted religious activities cannot serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In fact, Lord Krishna mentioned that we should give up all the assorted, different type of religious activities and surrender unto Him. So it follows here suit that those who are involved in performing different religious activities, religious rituals, they are not able to fully surrender to Krishna. And to fully surrender to Krishna is our prime objective. We are in the process, we are learning how to become fully surrendered by practicing the 9 processes of devotional service. And so, we should focus on that and not be involved in other religious activities. 7. Become united with one purpose and serve Hari. Become united. Prabhupada, even when he was to leave the planet, he reiterated this point. It is coming from his guru. He wanted his devotees in ISKCON, to work together to be able to sustain what he has given and expand what he has established. That requires unity. But unity does not necessarily mean that there is not going to be diversity or inclusiveness. Because inclusiveness and diversity, they are subsumed in unity. And so we may have different, frames of mind, but ultimately, or we may have different approaches on how we want to do the preaching, but ultimately we have to work out some modalities that we are following what Prabhupada requires of us, that we are being united. We may have different opinions, even in our families. But it's not that someone comes to say, my way or the highway. There should be a consensus. And that is arrived at based on collective efforts, shared ideas. Even Prabhupada used to consult with his disciples. He had no need to consult with the disciples, but just to teach us. So unity is required. Unity means we're valuing the opinion of others. Why? Because we are volunteers. Majority of us are not being paid. So there is a different way to manage and lead a non-profit organization, vice versa, the secular organizations. There's a particular leadership model that is required in leading a non-profit organization. And for us, a faith-based non-profit organization. So you don't order people around as if you are the entrepreneur. You don't order your families around as if you are the Ishwara. We have to see each and every one as Krishna's child. So if we treat people around us nicely, Krishna will invoke the mercy of Krishna. I don't know whether I told this story in this class before, but I remember some years ago I was in Canada, and in Montreal, one devotee from Toronto, he was traveling with some brahmacharis. So he came to me and he said, Maharaj, what is the best way to help all these devotees who are traveling with me on this Harinam? I said, oh, it's a very simple thing. He said, tell me. I said, just treat each and every of these devotees who are with you serving the mission of Srila Prabhupada. Treat them as your beloved younger brother. You know what? You know his response? He said, Maharaj, that is very difficult. I said, what is the difficulty? Because we sit down on the asana and preach how we are all part and parcel of Krishna. What does that mean? It means that we are a family. Now to practice it, you say, oh, it is very difficult. So, our time is far gone. But these principles are very, very nice for all of us. And if you want the book itself, you could reach out to me. I have a digital copy. The 64 principles of community building. Bhaktisiddhanta's 64 principles of community building. You can reach out to me on email, bbs.bts8@gmail.com, and I can send you a copy. It's good for everyone, whether you're a family person, you're a Sankirtan leader, you are in this movement. If you're in this movement, you're a potential leader. If even you're just joining today, you are a potential leader. And leading what? A community of devotees. Okay, any comments? Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. A quick question, Maharaj, that Bhaktivinoda Thakur named Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur as Bimla Prasad. So what was the logic behind that? Well, it seems that a more appropriate name would have been Krishna Prasad or Vishnu Prasad or something. Bimla is the name of Mother Durga, if I'm not wrong. So what is the idea behind that?
Okay. That's a question that Bhakti Vinod can answer. So, he has, a devotee does not, if you talk referring to Durga is also a devotee. Yeah. Durga is a pure devotee. And the whole idea is that people don't like Durga because, just like we don't like the corpse. The corpse are not our enemies, but we don't like them because we feel that, I bet in some countries the corpse are really very corrupt, so it's justified not to like them. But Durga is not corrupt. She's in charge of the prison. So for you to get out from this prison, you must get the favor of Durga. So Bhakti Vinod calls it on Durga Prasad. Bimal Prasad.
Maharaj, can I ask your permission to just give one comment on this one question?
What?
The comment, what he's asked.
Oh, please, go ahead. Yeah.
See, Jagannath Puri is only one place where we get Mahaprasad. Why it's called Mahaprasad is because it is once it is offered to Jagannath and it's offered to Durga Devi, then it's come to us. So similarly, it's Jagannath Prasad. That's why she accepted this as Durga Prasad. Like Vimala Devi. It's a prasad from Jagannath which came through Vimala Devi. That's why it's given.
Thank you. Any other comments? What's the time there? 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock? You want to ask a question? Yes?
Hare Krishna. Thank you for such a nice class. I was appreciating what you were saying about whenever we preach, seeing them as our younger siblings, or whenever we're just trying to teach anybody. But I was thinking that a lot of us have come from broken families. So when I think about how I treated my little sister growing up, I would not treat the people that I'm preaching to like that. So if that's the case, how do we go about fixing those relationships and learning how to deal with people?
Yeah. It's a whole science of how to deal with family members, family development. You have to be a specialist in that field, perhaps to a PhD level, family development. So sometimes we just, and it's a problem generally in the world now, that, you know, someone is up to the age of, you know, biological maturity, and then they get married. They have no idea about the psychology of men. They have no idea about the psychology of women. Nothing. And then they want to experiment with their partners. And then the children are coming up, they want to experiment with the children. How to deal with children. So it's a big problem. This is called a general problem. In research, we have a general problem and a specific problem. If a general problem, you don't need to kill yourself about general problem. But the point is that we have to learn. First of all, without Krishna consciousness, it's very difficult for us to treat people nicely, even in the families. Because it becomes like a tug of war, a show of power, a show of control. The older sibling will have a show of control on the younger one. If the younger one is maybe is stronger, then also the reverse could be the case. But if we have Krishna in the center of our dealings, the center of our families, if we are nurtured in Krishna consciousness, we will definitely have that evolution of love that flows from the parents to the children, and then that expands. In fact, the relationship between the parents affects the children. The children imbibe the culture, the collective culture of the parents' consciousness. So normally, I used to advise people who are married, especially when they have a little kid, that they should avoid being offensive to each other. Because that energy radiates in a family. And those little kids, they imbibe that culture. And then they grow with that culture embedded in their consciousness, and they radiate that to anybody or in any environment. So that's a major setback in our modern setting, our modern society, that we don't seem to take cognizance of how the environment impacts on our behavior. But there is a general principle even about that. It's called the field theory. The environment impacts on us. And a gross example is when, okay, say, during the winter, now it's very cold in America, a place like Chicago and other places. And you may put on many jackets, but go out into the cold and remain a little while. The cold starts sinking in you. You start feeling it. That is the impact or the effect of the environment. In a similar way, when we come to the holy dam, whether we like it or not, just by stepping on the holy dam, we have a positive impact. It affects us in a very good way, without even acknowledging or without we knowing. And if we create an enabling environment in the families, the children are impacted by that positive energy without the children even knowing. In most cases, the people we marry, and then we don't know anything about all of these environmental laws, and then we start treating each other in a bad way, and then the children imbibe that culture, and then they start transmitting that culture to their younger ones instead of really showing that love and care. So yeah, it's a serious concern. But in our Krishna consciousness, we try to learn how to become Krishna conscious and see how we can treat people in a very nice way. All right, so we'd like to draw this curtain for today. Thank you for participating in the celebration of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.